Here we go again, folks. Chapter 4 in LabView. You're going to learn some really useful stuff here in Chapter 4. How to deal with arrays, which are either rows, columns, or rows and columns together. And these things called matrices that have a lot of application in your future engineering courses. Let's get right into how you do a array and some array operations. So what you see in front of you here is the first tutorial that you're going to do. So I'm going to step you through on how to create an array, how to find some of these array functions, and some of the best ways to create your indicators. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit and show you how to get started here. All right, first step is to begin and put an array in here. So we're going to right click, and there is a thing called arrays here. So I'm going to take array and just drag it in to the front panel and just drop it. Now what an array is, it starts out as just a container. It's nothing in there. So you can put all kinds of things in here. You can put real, you can put integer numbers, you can put Boolean. So you have to tell it what you want in there. So we're going to want just regular double precision numbers. So I'm going to go to numeric control. You can do an indicator as well, but I'm just going to drop it right in there, and now you see we've got an array. Right now the array is set up. Okay, now that we've placed the array in, and we can resize it, so we can go down to the bottom here. Well, usually we can resize it. I don't know why I can't here. But usually when you have an array, you get this little grid thing in the bottom corner. So I'm not seeing that. Now down in the bottom right corner here, you see that I can resize this array. I could go this way, or I could go down. But right now I have what's known as a one-dimensional array. So let me just pull it down a little bit. Now once I've done that, it kind of locks in until I put some more values in. So to put actual values in, you just click and just type some numbers in, and now you've got something going. But it's kind of interesting now that once I have stopped dragging that the first time, I can't seem to get that thing again to resize. But we'll work into that. All right, so right now I've got a one-dimensional array with one column, 3 rows, and over here on the right, that's my indice indicator. So right now what I want to do, if I wanted to make this into a 2-dimensional array, I right-click on this, and I can go to data operations, and that's not where I'm going. Go a little bit further down, add dimension. Okay, by adding a dimension, it allows me now to make this into not only one row or one column, but I can now make it into multiple rows and multiple columns. I can make it into a table, in other words. So I'm going to make it this big, and now I would like to fill this array with some numbers. So let's say I put 7, 14, 3, and -6. Okay, so I do that, and I've got my array filled now. Now if you'd like to do things with this array other than just have it there, we can set up over in the block diagram some functions. So I'm going to right click, and there is an array palette here. So let's say we bring in max and min. Now here it's very important that you do right click visible items, because nobody's going to guess what that function is right there. So now max min, and we can now wire this array into this function. Now if you look closely, this is one of those orange lines, but you see, notice it's a double orange line. it's indicating that it's an array. So there's more than just a single value going in. Now on the outside here, I'm just going to move the cursor. The top thing that's an orange dot was where I'm going to find the maximum value in the array. The next one is going to tell me what the indices, in other words, what row and what column the max or min was found in. And the third one down is going to be our min value followed by the min index. So let's come on over here to the front panel again, and maybe I'll make this one minus 8. Okay, just so I get a value, something that's a maximum in the first column and a minimum in the first column, something is a maximum in the second column, just to see how this works. All right, instead of coming over here and right-clicking and doing controls and stuff, the easiest way to display data is to go to the function, right-click on the output, and then do create create an indicator. Okay, so it even kind of gives you a nice name for that indicator. And then I'm going to go next, and I'm going to create another indicator. Okay, so these are the max. Now notice that for the indices, it created a matrix container because since this is a table, the index has a row and a column. And then I'm going to do create again, indicator. There's the min value, it's just a single value. And lastly, the index. Okay. And that's another array. All right, so on the front panel, I've got some stuff that I've got to just bring over. Okay, so now when it comes over, it shows only one value. So I'm just going to bring this over into 2. And then I got to move that over a bit. And I'm going to make this 2 values big. Okay, now let's just run this thing and watch what happens. So I'm going to run this. Okay, so it said that the maximum value in my array was 14, and it was found in row 1, column 1. So first one's row, I think, yeah, row, yeah, first one's row, second one's column. Now you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, it looks like 2 is in the first row, first column, you know? And now it says it's 1, 1. Here's how it works, folks. The first row is the 0 row. The second row is row 1. The third row is row 2. Wait, 0, 1, 2. Yeah, that's how it works. And then column 0, column 1. So 14 is actually in row 1, column 1. And the minimum is in not row 0, row 1, it's in row 2, column 0. So just remember that with Labview arrays that the row number starts at 0 and the column number starts at 0. Okay? So the rest of this, I think that you can figure out yourself. Array size, transpose. Just remember when you do the array size, you're going to need to drag to create two rows for that because you have rows and columns, row, column. And please label things nicely like I did here. So there is tutorial 4.1 that gives you most of the knowledge you need for using arrays. One other thing I'd like to show you with arrays, and this will work for matrices also, is let's say you set up a big array and you want to save these values so that next time you open up the VI that these values come back and they're not just all zeros and you have to type them in again. So what you should do is go up to the top left corner of the array until you get dots. You see all these 9 dots all around, or there's probably 8 dots. That means you're selecting the whole array. So you should right click and then you can go down to data operations and you can say make current values default. Okay, so I can click on that. All right, now watch what happens if I just close this and I guess I'll save. And I'm just going to open it back up. Notice that the values here in the array where I made the default values, remember what I did? I went up to the top here, right click, and I went to data operations and I made current values default. Now you have to be careful when you do this that you're not just clicking on one cell, or else you're just going to make that one cell a default that comes up. Notice array 2 down here, I didn't make those defaults, so all the data I put in before just got erased. So having that little operation for saving stuff is pretty helpful. All right, our next VI we are going to open is tutorial 4.2 that starts on page 114. So multiplication of matrices and of arrays, and I want to show you that there's quite a bit of a difference between those two. All right, so let's open that up and show you the full context of what's going on. So let me show you the front panel first, and you have this on your sheet. All right, we're going to set up two matrices, and notice that these are coming in with the data automatically in there. That's because I went to each of these things and went to the edge and right-clicked, and I did data operation. I made the current values default. So good to do that. Now you can drag these matrices as big as you want, and then you can fill whatever portion. Anything that's 0 or grayed out acts as if it's not even there. Okay, so here with the matrix, it's a new container. It's done really very similar to an array. Where you're going to right-click, you're going to go to arrays and matrix, and you're going to go to real matrix. You don't want to get into a complex matrix. That's a different data type. So a real matrix there, and you don't have to drag anything. It's ready to go. All right. So that's how you do a matrix. To get the matrix functions that you see over here, you right-click, and it's not going to be an array because those are array functions. So you're probably going to have to go and will go into mathematics, linear algebra. Okay, so all of the matrix stuff is in linear algebra. All right, so linear algebra. Now this multiply right here, it will work for matrices and it will work for arrays. So the reason it's the same here is just to show how different the multiplication works. Notice the data type here, this dotted orange line, that's a special data type matrix, and it's treated differently in a lot of operations than our arrays, which are just the solid orange. But let's say you're going to multiply these two together. Okay. There's a certain operations that need to take place. So let me just run this, okay? And there's some things we can learn. Okay, first of all, this first matrix has 3 rows, 1, 2, 3. Now remember they're numbered 0, then row 1, then row 2, and the columns, there's 2 of them, which would be column 0 and then column 1. And then the second one has 2 rows and 4 columns. And we've done this in Excel before. When you multiply 2 matrices together, you have to have the same number of columns in the first as you do rows in the second. And the final resulting matrix will have the same number of rows as the first and the same number of columns as the second. So I've tried to emphasize that. If you try to multiply things together that don't have the columns of the first equal to the rows of the second, the operation will not take place. When you multiply two, so when we multiply these two together, there's a whole operation that happens. When you multiply 2 arrays together, and these are the exact same numbers, you don't get the same thing, because all array multiplication does is take the first 2 times the second 2, and that gives you 4. And then it takes this 4 times that 1 and gives you 4. And then, the 3 times the 4 is 12, 2 times 6 is 12. And then everything else is just ignored over here. You can see it's all grayed out because array multiplication only multiplies up to the size of the smaller dimension on each of the arrays. So since the second one only has 2 rows, this is the product's only going to have 2 rows, and since the first one only had 2 columns, it's going to have 2 columns. That's different than matrix multiplication. In engineering, you are going to do a lot of matrix multiplication, so make sure that you understand how to use these matrices. Now, the multiply, which you can just get off of the regular numeric palette, that will work for matrices, arrays, or regular just real numbers. It would probably be better in the future that you don't use this and you actually go into the math palette and go to linear algebra, and you should use matrix multiplication, which is this one right here. So this would be a preferable function to use. So I'm just going to just show. Now if I run this again, I get the same thing. So this linear algebra multiplication will work the same as regular multiply for matrices. But if I brought this linear algebra A cross B into down here, it would not work. Most of the time, like I said, engineers are going to work with the linear algebra palette and matrices when doing multiplication. So you got the names of the functions up in here. Matrix size, you're going to use that. Matrix multiply. So nothing else should be terribly difficult for you on this one. Here we have tutorial 4.3 that shows some things about taking inverses of matrices, and we've done some of this in Excel before. Now I have a matrix here we're going to find out that it's one that you can't take the inverse for. In other words, it's called singular. So I'm going to run this VI and let's just see what happens. Notice the inverse is just grayed out. It can't take it. There's this condition number. It's enormous. So this condition number is an indication that this is not a good matrix to try to get the inverse for. The determinant. 0 means you can't, if the determinant is 0, you can't get an inverse. And also the inverse error flag that comes up that you see over here in the block diagram, that's an indicator that we've got an error. Now I'm going to come back up here to matrix A, and I'm going to just right click on it quickly and go to data operations and reinitialize the default value. So these are the values you're going to run when you do this VI. So I hit run. Now I get an inverse. Now I get a much smaller condition number. I get a determinant that's not 0, and I get 0 on the error flag that comes up. All right, nothing new here. You're just going to make a matrix, and then you're going to go do an inverse matrix, the condition number, determine. These are all in the linear algebra palette. And you notice if you take a matrix and you multiply by the identity matrix, you get that matrix back again. Things we've done in Excel, just did again here. All right, so good luck, and we'll see you on the next VI. On tutorial 4.4, this is probably the most useful bit of coding that you'll have for future engineering classes, because it shows you, if you look in the book on the pages there, on pages 121 to 123, the coefficient matrix are the coefficients out in front of your unknowns, and then the constants here are what's on the right hand side of your equations. So the process here is we're going to take an inverse of the coefficient matrix. We're going to multiply that by the right hand side. That's going to give us a solution. And then I'm going to show you that there's actually another VI called solve linear equations, where you put those two things in, and instead of a matrix multiplication, it uses a different technique, perhaps a Gauss elimination or something like that. So let's go ahead and run this. Bam. Okay, look at that. These are the solutions for your 3 unknowns. So hold on to this bit of code, because when you take statics in the future from Professor Payton, he's probably going to want you to do this kind of thing. LabView is really handy and visual for doing it. Okay? On tutorial 4.5, we're going to use a new kind of loop. In the past, we've used a while loop, which is a loop that continues on until a certain condition is met, and then the loop will close. And remember, there was usually a little stop sign in the bottom right. Well, the for loop is when you know how many times you want to repeat a loop. So I'm just going to remind you or show you how to get that. You're going to go to Structures, you're going to go to For Loop, you drag that into a size. You can right click, go to Visible Items Label. Alright, you have two things in the loop. You have the N, which is the loop count, and then the I, which is a loop iteration. Alright, I've put a little wait button in here that comes from up here in the timing. In here there's a wait, so that's where I got that, and that's all there is to it. Now let's take a look. So whatever you wire into the count, the loop count, that's how many times this thing is going to repeat. And each time it repeats, it changes this loop iteration variable I by 1. Now, let's say I put a wait of 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, I have to get rid of this loop. And let's just watch this run. Now first, look at what the iteration variable starts with. Click Go, 0. Okay, then 1. So this is going to repeat 8 times. So the last iteration, it will be 7, because the first time it did the loop, it did it with the variable 0 for I, then 1, then 2. So if you go from 0 to 7, and you include the 0, that's 8 times. So we'll be using for loops a lot in the future, so make sure you understand how this all works. On tutorial 4.6, we're going to use the for loop again. So I'm just going to put visual items just to remind us that that is a for loop. And the idea is we're going to have the user input some things like how many array elements we want to create. So let's say we want to create 7. Let's say the minimum possible value is 50, and the maximum possible value is going to be, let's say, 120. All right. So let's just quickly run and see what it does. Notice this is the last value that it created, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 things in the array. Okay, so we started with these elements coming into the for loop, and when you have these little points, these are called loop tunnels, as you can see, and these are values from outside that come into the loop one time. Alright, so we've got to subtract. So this random number gives us a value of between 0 and 1. And then I'm going to add my min value. So it's a little algorithm I have. Notice the number of elements is the number of times I'm going to do this loop. And let me just make this a little bit bigger. And you can see how that works. So pretty easy thing. It runs through this and does this calculation in here of creating random numbers, in this case between 50 and 120. It doesn't send these things out until we're all done. So that looks like it does instantaneously. We could put a wait in here to slow things down, but good enough. In tutorial 4.7, it's going to be a lot like the last one, except that instead of just filling one column, we're going to fill columns and rows. So if you see on the left here, what I've done is I've created 6 rows and 4 columns. So in each row, there's 4 elements that have to be created. So let's see how that's going to work over here on the right side. So here in the block diagram, and it's a kind of big block diagram, I have 2 for loops. I've got a for loop on the outside and a for loop on the inside. So the way you do that is just you create one for loop, then you drag another one inside that one. Now what happens with nested for loops is the outer one gets evaluated once. It then goes into the inner loop, and the inner loop does its number of times. So if we have 4 columns that we want, this is going to create 4 numbers. It's then going to tunnel out and it's going to tell us, what our current row is, and then it's going to stack up over here on this auto index tunnel. All right, so that auto index tunnel is not going to let any of the data out until the outer loop is all done. So what happens is a row number comes in, then column number, then all the columns of that row are going to be evaluated. We're then going to send that out to the array, which is going to stack up. We're going to wait 2,000 seconds, then we're going to get another row, and then come in here, do this 4 times. So let's go execute this VI and see how it looks. So let's tile left, right. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Now, all this is going to clear out, so let me just close this and open it real quick. So that's the first row. Okay, there's the second row, third. Now remember, the row number starts at 0. Okay, fifth row. So fifth row is the last one because row 1 is actually the 0th row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice that this data for the two-dimensional array didn't pop out of here until all of the 6 rows were completed. All right, let's see if we can see how this works. Okay, so let's try start single stepping. So here it is. All right, hit it once. It does the wait. Okay, then it's going to do the inner loop. You notice how it's flashing? It's going to subtract. Do that, do that, do that. It's going to finish that inner loop. All right, and then it's going to do this again. And it does this 4 times. So it completes the loops 4 times. After that, it's finished that outer loop. Now it waits. It comes back into the inner loop. Then it's going to do this 4 times. So I hope that helps, kind of helping you understand how this thing works. But in any event, hopefully you'll have some fun and make a nice looking VI. Here in tutorial 4.8, what you're going to do is, let me just do tile left, right. You're really just going to open up your tutorial 4.7. As you can see, I originally opened 4.7. I'm just going to change that to 4.8 sample, because I've already done this. So you're going to open that up, then you're going to go over here to the block diagram and make the following changes. Okay, first off, you're going to get rid of all the stuff down here with the iterator. Okay, you're going to get rid of that and the wait. So you notice that we don't have any other stuff on the inside except this inner for loop. We're also going to take this number of columns, and instead of being inside the for loop, we're going to take that outside the for loop. So this is going to be step number 1. Okay, so we take all this out of here. I can even put this here. All right, next step is we want to I want to take all this code that we have here and make it into what's known as a sub-VI. And the reason I want to do that is if I want to reuse this random number generator to fill rows and columns, I don't want to have put all this stuff in there. So watch what we do. I'm going to left click and I'm going to highlight all of this. Okay, I didn't want to pick up the max values here, so let me just pull those out. Okay, so I just want to get everything from the loop into there. Okay, so all that is highlighted, nothing else, just the inner and outer loops. Okay, now I want to click on Edit up here, and I'm going to go to Create Sub-VI. Okay. All right, notice that it took all that code and made it into this one little thing right here. Okay, so after we've done that, we then want to do a little bit of editing on it to make it look nicer, and we will do that by we're going to double click on this sub-VI, click. All right, we're going to open it up. Now I can tile this left, right. Okay, so this is what's in the VI, all the stuff. But what I want to do is do File, save as. Okay, I'm going to put it in the same place, and I'm going to call this, well, you're going to call yours file 2D array maker. So I'm going to put 2D array maker sample. So I'm doing this again for me. All right, so I put OK. And now I have created, notice we have a 2D array maker VI. And we can use that and put it into anything we need. So next thing is we're going to come up here and we can double click on the sub VI icon in the upper right corner. So I'm going to click. All right, and I get this. Okay, so we want to change this default picture to something else. So let's go to glyphs. That's right there. And maybe we can find something. Let's look for an array. Okay, there's array. So once we find array, we're going to put it inside of here. Okay, so I want to delete what's in here first. So there has to be a select or here's a select. So I'm going to select everything in here and then hit delete, and it's gone. Now I bring the glyph in, okay, which is this. Can I resize it? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay, and be done with it. All right. So now, if you look in the top right corner, that's what my VI symbol is going to be. All right. Next thing is, while I'm in this 2D array, I want to click on File VI Properties. So File, I'm going to go down to VI Properties. And I'm going to go into Category Documentation, and I want to give a description of what this VI does. Okay, that way when somebody goes to context help, they're going to get a description. So I'm going to type in what this does. Okay. Now the other thing is we should also list what are the inputs that somebody is going to have to know about. Okay, the inputs are going to be a number of rows. Okay, and then for our output, it's going to be a 2D array. All right, so once we have that documentation, we put OK. And we're done here. So now I'm going to do File, Save this. Okay, and I'm going to File, Close. Okay. So now over here, my VI, I'm going to right-click Visible Items Label. Okay, I've got my 2D array maker. I have my own function that I've made. Now, you don't know what this does, okay? Well, you're going to go to this window. You're going to say, actually, we're going to go to Help, Show Context Help. We're going to hover over this, and look, it tells us what to put in. It says number of rows, number of columns, maximum possible value. Now, all this is wired here, and we can use it, okay? Now, before you leave this sample VI, we want to do just a few other things, which are on page 9. Now that we have these values, we're going to show you a few new things that you can do. All right, so I'm going to now File, Close this, and I'm going to go to my 4.8 sample. Okay, taking this out. Okay, so actually I'm just going to open up my already made one. So let me open up my tutorial 4.8 actual. Okay, and I'm going to tile left right. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to have the inputs as usual, outputs of 2D array maker. Then we're going to choose a desired row and a desired column that we're going to extract from this. So that's going to be just a little extra operation over here in the block diagram. So block diagram, we come in here with our 2D array maker. So you're just going to come out of there, and that array is not only going to go to the 2D array, but it's going to go to an array subset. Now array subset has different values you can be pulling out of. Okay, over here on the array subset, it's got 4 inputs here. I don't know if we can expand it further. No. So the first 2, the index says this would be what row you want, and then the next one would be how many rows you want. Okay, down here, the third one down is the index for what if you want a column, and then this one would be, say, we want 1 column. So the top 2 are for the rows, the bottom 2 are for the columns. So down here you can see I've taken out a row by using the top 2, and over here on the top here I did the column by using the bottom 2. And the 1 is how many rows or columns you would like. So let's go over here, tile left right, and just show what happens. So let's say we want to make, I don't know, let's say 10 rows, and we want 4 columns, and we want to go from 10 to 50. Okay? We can then decide what row we're going to want to look at. So let's say I want to look at row 0, and I want to look at column 0, 1, 2. Okay, let's run this and see what happens. Okay. All right, so we filled the array. We've got 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got the 10 rows going across. So I said I wanted row 0. Row 0, notice that's the first row, and I wanted column 2. Column 2, the first one is 0, second one is 1, and third one is column 2. So just going back here, we've used our sub VI, and let me just make that full screen. We made the 2D, and then we went up to array subset, used it twice. So hopefully you'll be able to recreate that and see how it works. Yeah, that's correct. Tile left right. All right, so what I want you to do is you're going to set up 3 different coefficient arrays, 3 right-hand sides, and you're going to get the solution matrix with a condition number and a determinant. All right, so you're going to create a sub VI, all right, and then you're going to use it 3 times in this one problem 4.6. All right. If I go to help, show context help, I want to see that you have a nice description. Okay, you see it says the sub VI calculates the determinant, condition number, and solution matrix, and the inputs are a coefficient, the right hand side, the output is the condition number, determinant, and it even gives us some stuff about terminal data types, which I don't know where that came from, but I didn't put it in. Alrighty, so I'm hoping that you can do that and see how this neatens things up. One of the things that you're probably wondering is, how do I get the multiple copies of this to come in? Now, there's a few ways. I mean, you can hit control once you have one, control and drag, and you can make a copy. But what if this was a brand spanking new VI? You know, how would you get a sub VI to go into it? What you do there is you do control, not control, you right click, and you go down here and you just select VI. And once you hit select VI, you can go into whatever, you know, directory you need. But I have equation solver, so I click that, I put OK, and I can bring it in there. Remember, right click, visible items label. All right, so just another way to bring in extra copies when you need them. All right, on the last one, instructor 4.1. Okay, you're going to input how many rows of data you want to create. So let's say I want to create 12 rows of data, and I want to create 6 columns. Now I'm going to run this and just show you what happens. All right, notice the first row is random numbers between 0 and 1. The second row is between 1 and 2. And then the third one is between 2 and 3, 3 and 4. Okay, so I'm just going to put this first row is between 0 and 1. You know, the second one is between 1 and 2, and so on. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a hint. Okay, now we've used the random generator 0 to 1. Okay, so the random number generator just by itself could fill in this first row. The second row, you have to take the random number generator and add 1 to it. And then the next one, you're adding 2 to it. Now, you're going to want to go back and use, the 2D array maker, back where we had 2 for loops that were embedded in one another. And we created random number generators, and we used our own min and max. Now, you might want to think about using that little thing I inside the outer loop. You might find a usefulness for that. Okay, so that's my only hint. Good luck. If you can get this one, I will be highly impressed with you. Okay, thanks for coming for this video, and I will see you in our next one.